The rain came sideways on Route 3 that Tuesday morning, the kind of rain that does not fall so much as a tack. It hit the pavement like gravel bounced off the white line and turned the whole world gray before 6 o'clock. The mountains in the distance had disappeared entirely, swallowed by cloud and cold, and the road stretched out empty in both directions like something that had given up on leading anywhere. Riley Cross was already soaked through before she noticed the front tire had gone soft. She pulled the delivery bike to the shoulder and stepped off her boots, finding the mud at the edge of the asphalt. The insulated bags strapped to the back held $40 worth of morning pastries for a law firm downtown, the kind of order that kept Dorothy's Bakery in the black on slow weeks. Riley checked her phone. 6:14. Delivery window closed at 6:30. She had 16 minutes and a flat tire and 3 miles between her and the only job she had left in the world. She did not panic. Panic required a belief that someone was coming to fix things, and Riley Cross had stopped believing that somewhere around her 18th birthday. She crouched down, pressed 2 fingers against the tire, felt the slack. Not a slow leak. Fully gone. She stood back up and looked down the road in both directions. Nothing. Not a headlight, not a shadow, not even a truck at the horizon. Just rain and asphalt and the particular silence that comes when you cannot hear anything to begin with. Riley had been deaf since birth. Not hard of hearing, not partially impaired. Profoundly, completely, irreversibly deaf. She had never heard rain, never heard wind, never heard the engine of a car or the voice of her own mother, or the sound her own laugh made in a room. She lived in a world that communicated entirely in frequencies she could not access, and she had built her entire life around that fact, the way you build a house around a stone that will not move. You do not fight the stone. You work with it. You make it part of the foundation. She unslung her backpack, pulled out the laminated card she carried everywhere. The one that said in large black letters, "I am deaf. I read lips. Please face me when you speak." She tucked it into her jacket pocket where she could reach it fast. Then she pulled out her notepad and pen, set the bike on its kickstand, and sat down on the insulated bags to wait. Not because she expected help, because she had done the math and waiting was the only option left. The vibration came before the light. She felt it in the soles of her boots. First, a low rolling tremor coming up through the asphalt and into her feet. Then, in her palms, pressed flat against the bag she was sitting on. A deep, rhythmic pulse that had a weight to it. A mass, something that was not one engine, but many engines running in tight formation. Approaching from the west at a speed that suggested they were not slowing down for anything, Riley stood up. The headlights came around the bend in 2 clean rows, stacked and precise, cutting through the gray rain like something military. She counted them automatically, the way she counted everything. The way deaf people learned to catalog the world through every sense that still worked. 10 bikes. 20. More. A full column riding in pairs their formation, so tight they moved like a single organism. And, at the front, a man on a black Harley Road King who sat in the saddle like he had been born there and would probably die there, and had made peace with both facts. They were not slowing down. Riley stepped back from the road, one hand bracing the delivery bags, and for 1 second she thought they would blow past her, the way every other vehicle had blown past her in the last 14 minutes, the way most things in her life had blown past without stopping. The spray from 40 tires would hit her like a wall and they would be gone, and she would still be here with her flat tire and her closing delivery window and her $16 in checking. The lead bike slowed, not dramatically, not with screeching brakes or Hollywood skids, just a gradual, deliberate reduction in speed, the way a man slows down when he has seen something that requires a decision and has already begun making it. The bikes behind him responded instantly, a ripple effect running back through the column, 40 engines pulling back in near perfect unison until they were idling on the shoulder 30 feet behind Riley's delivery bike, their headlights cutting through the rain and landing on her like a stage light she had not asked for. The man at the front pulled off his helmet. Cole Mercer was 34 years old and looked like someone had carved him out of something harder than wood and left him out in weather for a decade. His hair was dark and rain wet, pushed back from a face that had strong bones and sharper eyes, gray-green and direct, in a way that most people found unsettling until they realized it was just honesty. He had a jaw that suggested stubbornness and a set to his mouth that suggested he had been practicing not showing what he felt for long enough that it had become permanent. He wore a black leather vest over a gray thermal, and on the back of the vest was a bird. A raven with its wings spread, stitched in dark thread against black leather, so that you almost had to know it was there to see it. He looked at the delivery bike. He looked at the flat tire. He looked at the insulated bags. Then he looked at Riley. She held up her laminated card. He read it. His expression did not change what she appreciated. Most people, when they read that card, went through a visible process: surprise, overcorrection, a performance of accommodation that was more about their own discomfort than her communication needs. Cole Mercer read the card and then looked back at her face and waited. That was all. She pulled out her notepad, wrote fast, turned it to face him. Flat tire, 3 miles from delivery address, closes in 12 minutes. He looked at the note, then he looked at the bags. He turned back to his column and made a short, sharp gesture with 2 fingers. Immediately, 2 men dismounted and walked toward the delivery bike. One crouched down to examine the tire. The other looked at Riley with the flat assessment of someone who fixed things for a living and wanted to know the scope of the job. Cole wrote on the notepad she held out to him. His handwriting was square and clear, a man who had learned to write for legibility rather than style. Danny will take the bags. I will ride you to the address. We will make it. Riley looked at the man he had indicated. Danny Voss was 38, lean and angular, with pale eyes that had a watchfulness to them. She recognized immediately the eyes of someone who had been disappointed enough times that they treated every new situation as a probable disappointment until proven otherwise. He was already lifting the insulated bags off her bike with the efficiency of someone who did not need to be told twice. She wrote, "You do not have to do this." Cole wrote back without hesitation, "I know." And that was the thing. That one word was the thing she would think about later in the quiet of her room, in the days that followed when everything changed and kept changing. Not the gesture, not the logistics of it. Just that word. I know. Not, it is fine. Not, do not worry about it. Not the verbal shrug that people use when they wanted credit for doing something they planned to minimize immediately afterward. Just a clean acknowledgement. He did not have to. He was choosing to. Those were 2 different things, and he understood the difference. She got on behind him. The Harley moved onto the road, and she felt the engine through every point of contact, through her boots, on the footrests, through her hands on his jacket, through her chest and ribs, and the base of her spine. It was not sound. It was something below sound, something that existed in a register she could actually access, a deep mechanical pulse that filled in the silence the way nothing else ever had. She had ridden in cars her whole life and never felt anything like this. The vibration was total. It was everywhere at once. They made the delivery with 4 minutes to spare. The receptionist at the law firm looked at Riley and then at Cole standing behind her in his vest and his rain wet hair and said something Riley could not catch because the woman was looking at Cole when she said it. Cole said something back. The receptionist signed for the delivery without further comment. Outside, Cole handed her the notepad again. Where do you need to go? She wrote her address. He drove her there without asking anything else. When they pulled up to the converted Victorian on Garfield Street that had been divided into 4 apartments with thin walls and thinner windows, he looked at the building for one moment before looking back at her. She could not read what was in his expression because it was gone before she could catalog it. She wrote, "Thank you. I mean it." He wrote, "My father died 3 days ago. We were taking him to Yellowstone. He wanted his ashes spread there." She stopped, looked at the words, then looked at him. He was not asking for sympathy. He was not performing grief. He was just stating a fact the way people sometimes offered a piece of themselves, not as an exchange, but as a kind of honest accounting. I did something for you. Here's who I am. Here's what I am carrying today. We are even. She wrote, I am sorry about your father. He nodded once. Then he put on his helmet, pulled onto the road, and was gone. She stood on the sidewalk in the rain and watched until she could no longer feel the vibration of his engine in the soles of her feet. Dorothy Halsey had been running Halsey's Bakery on Central Avenue for 22 years through 2 economic recessions, one divorce, one kitchen fire that took out the back wall and half her equipment, and the slow death of 3 other bakeries within 4 blocks that had not been as stubborn or as good. She was 58 years old with silver hair. She kept short and practical, the kind of hands that told you exactly what kind of work they had done for the past 4 decades, and a manner that reminded you of a high school teacher who genuinely liked her students but had zero patience for excuses. She was the one who had hired Riley 2 years ago when every other food service job in Billings had cited communication concerns or liability issues or a dozen other polite ways of saying they did not want to deal with the accommodation. Dorothy had interviewed Riley for 6 minutes, watched her work a register with a line of impatient customers during a Saturday rush, and offered her the delivery position on the spot. She was also the one who told Riley that Wednesday morning that the decision had been made above her. Riley sat across from Dorothy in the small office behind the kitchen and watched the older woman's lips very carefully, because Dorothy spoke at a pace that was easy to read and never turned away mid-sentence habits she had developed in the first month of Riley's employment and maintained without being asked. The dispatcher flagged the delivery. Late arrival damaged goods. Management reviewed the route data and your history. I fought it, Riley. I want you to know that. I told them the conditions on Route 3 were extraordinary and the damage was minimal, and you had a 2-year record without a single complaint. They said the decision was final. Riley wrote on her notepad, "Who is management now?" Dorothy's expression tightened slightly. "We have a new regional operations manager. He came in from the Denver office 6 weeks ago. His name is Harlan Reed. I do not know much about him yet, except that he moves fast and he does not reverse decisions." Riley wrote, "Did he review the route camera data?" Dorothy looked at her for a moment. "The camera on your bike malfunctioned that morning." No footage from the last 40 minutes of the route. Riley wrote that down and underlined it. Then she wrote, "That is unusual." Dorothy said, "Yes, it is." Neither of them said anything else for a moment. Dorothy refilled her coffee. Riley looked at the wall where a photograph hung of the bakery on its opening day in 2002. Dorothy younger and laughing, and holding a cake with both hands like it was something she had won. Riley wrote, "I will be okay." Dorothy said, "I know you will." She paused. "Come back when you need a reference. I will give you the best one you have ever seen." Riley nodded. She folded the last note she had written and put it in her pocket, and walked out through the kitchen, past the racks of morning bread, and the industrial mixers, and the warmth that smelled like butter and brown sugar. She pushed through the back door and stood in the alley, and breathed the cold October air, and did not cry, because crying required a belief that the situation was surprising, and nothing about this was surprising. She had 11 days until rent was due. She applied to 14 jobs over the next 2 days. She did it methodically in order of proximity to her apartment, starting with the places she could reach by bike and expanding outward. A grocery store on 3rd, a hotel on Broadway that needed housekeeping, a warehouse on the industrial side of town that did overnight sorting, a pharmacy on the west side, a call center that posted a job ad without reading it carefully enough, because a call center was perhaps the single worst possible workplace for a deaf person. And she removed it from the list herself before the recruiter had to say anything. 7 places did not call back. 3 called and asked clarifying questions about her hearing, and then found reasons to move in a different direction. 2 offered positions with hours that would not cover rent. 1 offered a position that would cover rent, but required operating machinery she had no certification for. She sat in her apartment on Thursday evening with her notebook open to a page of crossed out names, and did the math again the way she had been doing it every night, adjusting the numbers, looking for combinations that worked. The math did not work. It had not worked on Monday, and it did not work on Thursday, and it would not work by the time rent came due, regardless of how many times she ran the calculation. She was not a person who asked for help. This was not stubbornness in the romantic sense, not the kind of fierce independence that makes for good character in a movie. It was something more practical. She had asked for help at 18 when her mother remarried and moved to Phoenix, and suggested Riley was old enough to manage on her own. She had asked for help from the social services office that processed her case in 11 minutes and gave her a pamphlet. She had asked for help from the vocational rehabilitation program that connected her with 3 job coaches in 18 months, and a single placement that lasted 6 weeks before the company restructured. She had learned with the methodical thoroughness that came from having no other option that asking for help generated paperwork and sympathy and very little else. Very. She did not feel sorry for herself. Self-pity was a luxury that required spare time, and she had never had spare time. On Friday morning, she rode her bike to the north end of town, where the commercial streets gave way to warehouses, and then to open lots, and then to the kind of buildings that had stopped trying to look like anything in particular, and just presented themselves as structures that contained people doing things. She had a list of 3 remaining possibilities on that side of town: a laundry service, a catering company, and a place she had found listed on a community board under the heading General Maintenance and Cleaning, which gave only an address and a phone number and the words "Help Wanted Detail Oriented Reliable Physical Work." She could not call the phone number. She rode to the address instead. The building was set back from the road behind a gravel lot that held approximately 30 motorcycles, parked in organized rows, their chrome catching the flat morning light. The structure itself was a converted industrial space, the kind that had once been a machine shop or a fabrication facility with high ceilings and wide doors, and the kind of bones that suggested usefulness rather than comfort. Someone had put a covered porch along the front with heavy timber posts and a set of wooden chairs that were built for sitting and not for looking at. Over the main door, a carved wooden sign, the Raven's Nest. Riley looked at the motorcycles, looked at the sign, looked at the help wanted card she had torn from the community board and held in her hand. She got off her bike and walked to the front door and knocked. The man who opened it was enormous. Not in the exaggerated way of people who spent too much time in gyms building muscle for its own sake, but in the way of someone who had simply been built at a larger scale than most people and had spent a lifetime doing physical work that maintained it. He was 40 years old with a dark beard going gray at the edges and hands the size of small shovels and eyes that were unexpectedly kind. He looked at Riley and then at the notepad she was already holding up, which said, "I saw the help wanted listing. I am here about the cleaning position. I am deaf. I read lips. I read." He read the notepad. He looked at her. Then he stepped back and opened the door wider. His name was Marcus Holt, though everyone called him Brick, and he would later tell her that the nickname came from a foreman on a construction site 15 years ago, who had said he was about as easy to move as a load-bearing wall, and had meant it as an insult. Brick had taken it as a compliment and kept it. He led her into the main room of the Raven's Nest, which was large and open with exposed timber beams and concrete floors and a bar along one wall that was clearly functional rather than decorative. Tables and chairs. A pool table. A bulletin board covered in papers. Through an archway, she could see a hallway and the suggestion of more rooms beyond. Everything was clean enough, but had the particular quality of a space used hard by people who prioritized other things over tidiness. There were 4 other men in the room, 2 at the bar with coffee, 1 at the pool table doing something that involved the cue but not the balls, and 1 sitting alone at a corner table with his back to the wall and a cup of coffee he was not drinking, and a look on his face that she recognized from the previous Tuesday. Cole Mercer looked up and saw her. She expected surprise. She got something more complicated, a brief internal rearrangement, like a man who has been sitting with one set of assumptions and has just been handed new information and is deciding what to do with it. Then his expression settled back into its default of watchful, direct, and carefully neutral. He stood up. Brick was already writing on his own notepad, which he had retrieved from a hook near the bar, with the ease of someone who had put it there for a reason. The writing said, "You know, Cole." Riley wrote, "He helped me on Tuesday. Route 3. Brick read this. Then he looked at Cole. Something passed between them that Riley could not read because she was not in the sight line for both faces simultaneously. Cole walked to the table, picked up a pen, wrote on Brick's notepad, turned it to Riley. "You are looking for work." It was not a question. She wrote yes. He wrote, "What happened to the delivery job?" She wrote, "I was let go." He looked at that for a moment. Then he wrote, "Can you organize inventory filing records?" She wrote, Yes, I am good with numbers. He wrote, the position is cleaning and maintenance, but we also need someone to go through the storage room. It has not been organized in 3 years. There's equipment records, financial documents that need sorting. She wrote, I can do that. He looked at her. She looked back. She did not look away because she had learned early that people read diffidence into averted eyes when the actual communication was happening in the face and she needed to be read accurately. He wrote, 1 week. We will see how it goes. She wrote, what does it pay? He wrote a number. It was not generous. It was enough. She wrote, I will start today. The man at the bar, who had been watching all of this, Danny Voss, said something to the man next to him. Riley caught enough of it to understand the general shape. Something about this being a bad idea, something about a stranger, something about the timing. She did not react because reacting to things she was not supposed to have caught was a conversational complication she had learned to avoid. Brick showed her the storage room. It was a large space at the back of the building that appeared to have operated for several years on the organizational principle of putting new things in front of old things and calling it a system. There were shelving units along 3 walls holding equipment tools, spare parts, boxes of files, plastic bins without labels, and at least 4 objects she could not identify that appeared to have been placed there by someone who planned to come back and never did. In the center of the room were 6 filing cabinets, 2 of which were open, and a folding table covered in papers. Riley stood in the doorway and looked at it the way she looked at all large problems, without emotion, with assessment. She set down her backpack, pulled out her notepad, and began making a list. The first day, she did nothing but sort. She created categories labeling sections of the shelving in black marker on masking tape. Equipment, parts, historical records by year, administrative, unknown. She did not throw anything away. She did not make decisions about value. She only established order because order was the precondition for everything else. Brick came by at noon and looked at what she had done and wrote on his notepad, You are fast. She wrote, I like problems that have solutions. He thought about that for a moment. Then he wrote, most problems have solutions. People just do not want to do the work. She wrote, that is true. He wrote, you want lunch? We are having sandwiches. She wrote, I am fine. Thank you. He started to leave, then turned back. His writing was slower this time, more deliberate, like he was choosing words carefully. He wrote, I lost my wife 3 years ago. Car accident. I know what it is like to feel like you are the only one in a room. It gets better, not fixed. Better. Riley looked at the words for a long moment. Then she wrote, Why are you telling me that? He wrote, because you came in here and sat in that storage room alone, and you look like someone who is used to being alone. And because I figure if I tell you something true about myself first, it is easier for you to tell me something true if you ever need to. She looked at him. He was looking back at her with the open, uncomplicated patience of a man who had gotten to a point in his life where he did not see the value in being anything other than direct. She wrote, Thank you, Marcus. He wrote, Brick. Everyone calls me Brick. She wrote, Thank you, Brick. He nodded and left. She went back to work. The days settled into a shape. She arrived at 7, worked through the storage room with the focused intensity she brought to everything, took a short break at noon, worked until 4. The men of the Iron Ravens moved around her, the way people move around a new fixture in a familiar room, not hostile, not welcoming, just adjusting. She learned their faces. She learned which ones were easy to lip read and which ones dropped their consonants or turned away mid sentence. She learned that the man who worked on bikes in the side garage every afternoon was called Lefty and talked to his engines in a low, continuous murmur that she found she could feel more than read. She learned that Danny Voss made coffee at 7 and again at 2, and that the second pot was always better than the first, and that he knew this and drank the first pot anyway. She learned that Cole Mercer came in every morning, sat in the corner with his back to the wall, in the chair that had been his father's, and spent an hour not drinking his coffee. He was grieving. She recognized it not from any single behavior, but from the accumulation of small ones, the way he paused in doorways as though he had forgotten what he was going there for, the way he sometimes looked at the far wall with the raven carved into the wood above the fireplace, with an expression she had no word for, but recognized as the particular exhaustion of a person who is doing the work of continuing while simultaneously carrying something that has not yet become light enough to carry without effort. His father had built this place. She understood that without being told. On the fourth day, two of the younger members, men she knew as Cody and Pete, were at the table near the storage room when she came out to refill her water. They were talking, and she was not trying to read their conversation, but she caught a fragment because they were facing her direction and speaking without any awareness that she could understand them. Cody was saying something about her. She caught the word liability and the word distraction and the word coal. She walked back into the storage room and closed the door most of the way and stood there for a moment with her water bottle in her hand. Then she put it down and went back to the filing cabinet she had been working through. The fifth folder in the third drawer was where she found it. It was not labeled. That was the first thing she noticed because she had been building a labeling system, and unlabeled folders were exceptions she cataloged as she went. She opened it expecting blank forms or a duplicate record. It was a ledger. Handwritten columns, dates, amounts, reference numbers. She scanned the columns quickly the way she scanned everything, with the speed that came from a lifetime of processing visual information faster than most people because it was the only channel she had. The numbers did not match. She had spent 4 days going through 5 years of financial records, creating a rough picture in her mind of the club's income and expenses, the way a person builds a map from individual streets. She did not have an accounting degree, but she had grown up managing her own finances in conditions where a $10 error had real consequences, and she had a mind that held numbers the way other minds held melodies accurately and without effort. These numbers in this unlabeled ledger described transactions that did not appear anywhere else in the 5 years of records she had reviewed. Small amounts at first, then larger. A pattern of transfers to a reference she could not identify. Over a period she estimated at roughly 18 months, the total was substantial. She stood in the storage room with the ledger open in her hands and understood two things simultaneously. Someone was stealing from this club, and whoever had dropped this ledger in an unlabeled folder in the back of a filing cabinet had either done so accidentally or had wanted it found by someone who would not know what to do with it. She was not sure yet which possibility was worse. She put the ledger back exactly where she had found it. She noted the cabinet number, the drawer, the position, the folder sequence. She closed the drawer. She went back to the section of shelving she had been organizing and continued working until 4 o'clock. She put on her jacket, picked up her backpack, said goodbye to Brick with a wave, because he was across the room and it was easier. She did not look at Cole on her way out. She rode home through the cold October evening and sat at her kitchen table and wrote out from memory everything she had seen in the ledger, every figure she could recall, every reference number, the dates, the pattern of the transfers. She filled 2 pages. She read them back. She checked her own memory against itself, the way she had learned to check everything looking for gaps or distortions. The numbers held. She folded the pages and put them in the inside pocket of her jacket. Then she sat at the table in her small apartment with the thin walls and the window that looked out onto the fire escape and the city she could not hear. And she thought about what it meant that she had this information and what she was going to do about it and who she was going to trust. She thought about Cole Mercer writing "I know" on a notepad in the rain. She thought about Brick telling her something true about himself so that she would have something to stand on if she needed it. She thought about Dorothy Halsey saying the camera malfunctioned and looking at her with an expression that had asked a question without asking it. She looked at the folded pages in her inside pocket. She had not been asleep for 40 minutes when the floor vibrated. She felt it before she understood it, a quick, irregular pulse through the mattress, not the steady, low rhythm of the building settling or the occasional shudder of traffic on the street below. This was something at the door, someone moving on the old floorboards of the hallway outside, someone trying not to make noise in a building where the floors were too old and too thin for that kind of discretion. She sat up. The room was dark. She reached for the bedside lamp and then stopped. If someone was outside her door, she did not want them to know she was awake. She sat in the dark and watched the line of light under her door and waited. The line changed. A shadow passed across it, stopped, then moved on. She waited another 5 minutes. Then she turned on the lamp, got up, and walked to the front of the apartment. She checked the lock. She checked the chain. She looked through the peephole and saw the empty hallway. She went to the kitchen and made tea she did not want and sat at the table until 4 in the morning when the sky outside began to change. In the morning, she looked at the hallway. There was nothing visible, nothing disturbed, no mark on the door. But someone had been there. She put on her jacket, checked the inside pocket. The folded pages were where she had left them. She got on her bike and rode to the Raven's Nest. Cole was in his corner with his coffee when she arrived. She walked directly to his table. He looked up. She put her notepad on the table and wrote without sitting down. I found something in the storage room yesterday. A ledger. Unlabeled. The numbers describe transactions that do not appear anywhere in your official records. 18 months. Significant amount. Someone had access to your finances and was moving money out. She turned the notepad and waited. He read it. She watched his face. The stillness that crossed it was not the stillness of a man who was surprised. It was the stillness of a man who had been given confirmation of something he had been afraid to know. He looked up at her. She wrote, "Last night someone was outside my apartment door. They did not come in, but they were there. Whoever dropped that ledger may have realized it is missing from the sequence. They may know I left the building with something." He looked at those words for a long time. The second thing she had written connected directly to the first, and he understood exactly what the connection meant. He pulled the notepad back and wrote, "Where is the ledger now?" She wrote, "I left it where I found it. I wrote down what I remembered." She touched her jacket pocket. He looked at the jacket pocket. Then he looked at her face. He wrote, I need to see it. She wrote, I know. She sat down across from him, and outside the October sky pressed down on Billings like the lid of something closing, and somewhere in the back of the building, the storage room waited with its unlabeled folder and its wrong numbers. And the morning that had started like all the others was already something different. Now, something that had a shape and a direction and a weight that neither of them could yet fully name. Cole did not call a meeting immediately. That was the first thing Riley noticed about how he handled it. A different kind of man, a reactive man, would have stood up from that table and walked to the center of the room and made it loud. Cole sat with the notepad in front of him for a long moment, reading her words again, and then he picked up his coffee and drank it and looked at the far wall where the raven was carved into the wood above the fireplace. She waited. She was good at waiting. It was one of the things a deaf life taught you early, that the world moved at a pace calibrated to sound, to the speed of spoken words, and if you needed to receive information through your eyes rather than your ears, you learned to be still and patient and to let things come to you at the speed they came. He wrote, Who else knows you found this? She wrote, No one. He wrote, You did not tell Brick. She wrote, I did not tell anyone. I came here first. He looked at that, then he wrote, Why? She thought about how to answer that. Then she wrote, Because it is your club. And because whoever dropped that ledger may have wanted it found by the wrong person for the wrong reasons. I did not want to be the wrong person. He read that twice. She could tell by the way his eyes moved. Then he stood up and walked to the storage room without indicating she should follow, which she took as an indication she should follow. The ledger was where she had left it. He found it in 12 seconds, which told her he had some understanding of where things in this room might be, which told her something else entirely. He opened it. He stood at the filing cabinet with the folder in his hands and read through it the way she had read through it quickly at first, and then more slowly going back to the beginning and reading again. She watched his face. She was expert at reading faces. Most deaf people were not because of any natural gift, but because faces were the primary channel. The thing you trained for years to process faster and more accurately than most hearing people ever needed to. Cole Mercer's face was more controlled than most. But the ledger broke through the control in small places. A tightening around the eyes, a shift in the set of his jaw, a single, long exhale through his nose that he seemed unaware of. He closed the folder. He put it back exactly where it had been. Then he turned to her and wrote on her notepad, Gus Whitfield. He is our treasurer. Has been for 6 years. She wrote, How old is he? He wrote 45. He and my father were close. Stone trusted him more than almost anyone. She wrote, How long has your father been sick? He looked at that question for a moment, then he wrote diagnosed 14 months ago. Stroke first. Then complications. He knew he was dying for the last 8 months. She did the math and wrote it down for him to see. The transfers start 18 months ago, 6 months before the diagnosis. He looked at the numbers. She watched him understand what they meant. Gus had not started the transfers in response to Stone's illness. He had been moving money before it. Whatever his reasons, the timeline was not grief or panic at a dying leader. It was something that had been decided and executed with patience. Cole wrote, I need to talk to him. She wrote, Not yet. He looked up. She wrote, If you confront him before you understand the full picture, he controls what you learn. Right now, you have more information than he thinks you have. That matters. Cole looked at her. She held his gaze. She was not trying to manage him. She was trying to give him something useful because she had one skill that most people in this situation did not: the ability to assess information without the distortion of emotional history. She had no history with Gus Whitfield. She had only numbers, and numbers did not lie. He wrote, "What do you suggest?" She wrote, "Give me 2 more days in this room. Let me build the complete picture. Every transfer, every amount, every reference number. Then you know everything before you sit down with him." He was quiet for a moment, in the way of a man making a decision he has already made, but is taking one more second to be certain about. He wrote 2 days. She wrote 2 days. They walked back into the main room separately. No one appeared to notice. Riley went back to work. She spent the next 2 days in the storage room with the ledger and every financial record she had cataloged over the previous week. She built the picture the way she built everything from individual pieces outward, letting the shape reveal itself rather than imposing one on it. The transfers were not random. They followed a pattern, always in amounts just below the threshold that would trigger automatic review, always timed to coincide with legitimate high expense periods when the overall numbers would be harder to parse. Whoever had designed the method was not an amateur. The reference numbers in the ledger matched a business name she found in a registration document tucked into the bottom of the last box she had not yet opened. A company called Meridian Property Group, registered in Nevada, with a Billings address that turned out to be a mail forwarding service when she looked it up on her phone. Not a real company. A shell. She wrote it all down. $40,000 across 18 months. 12 individual transfers. A pattern consistent with someone providing regular payments to an outside party in exchange for something the ledger did not specify. On the evening of the second day, she found one more thing. It was not in the financial records. It was in a box she had labeled unknown. On her first day, the box of things she could not categorize and had set aside. At the bottom of the box, under a folded tarp and a set of bike registration documents from 2019, was a letter. Handwritten, 1 page. She read it. It was addressed to no one. It was written in a hand she did not recognize. Small and cramped, the hand of someone writing quickly under pressure. It described a meeting between the writer and representatives of an organization she understood from context to be the Voss Syndicate, a name she had not encountered until that moment, but whose nature became clear in the first 3 sentences. An organization that controlled significant criminal territory across eastern Montana and had been working for 2 years to expand westward into Billings. An organization that had, according to this letter, been receiving regular payments from someone inside the Iron Ravens in exchange for a promise of protection and eventual territorial alignment. The letter was not signed. But in the upper right corner, in different ink, as though added later, were 2 initials, GW. She sat on the floor of the storage room with the letter in her hands and understood the full picture. Gus Whitfield had not been stealing for personal gain. He had been paying tribute. He had been buying protection from an organization powerful enough that he believed the alternative was worse, and he had been doing it for 18 months without the knowledge of Stone Mercer, who was building a legacy, or Cole Mercer, who was inheriting one. She went to Cole. She laid out everything on his corner table, her notes, her timeline, the registration document for Meridian Property Group, and the letter. She did not add interpretation. She let him read. He read for a long time. The room around them continued its evening rhythm. Men coming in from the garage, someone turning on the television above the bar, Brick moving through the space with the efficient, unhurried pace of a man who kept things running through sheer consistency. Cole read everything twice. Then he put his hands flat on the table and looked at the wall. She wrote, "I am sorry." He picked up the pen. He started to write something. Stopped. Started again. He wrote, "My father knew Gus for 20 years. Rode together since they were in their 20s. Gus was the best man at my parents' wedding." She read that. Then she wrote that might be why Gus thought he could fix it without telling anyone. He may have believed he was protecting the club, that the payments bought time. Cole wrote time for what she wrote, I do not know, but I think Gus does. But Cole stood. He walked to the bar and said something to Danny Voss. Danny looked up. His face changed. He set down his glass and followed Cole toward the back. Riley stayed at the table. She watched the room. After a few minutes, Danny came back through the archway alone and stood at the bar without reaching for anything, just standing in the particular way of a man processing information that has weight to it. He looked at Riley once, not with hostility, with something that looked more like recalibration. The afternoon before Cole called the full meeting, Danny came to the storage room alone. Riley was reorganizing the last shelf when she heard the floor vibrate with his footsteps. She turned. He was standing in the doorway without a notepad, which meant he had come on an impulse rather than a plan. He looked at her for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the edge of the shelf where she could reach it and stepped back. She picked it up and read it. He had written, "I have been watching you work for 2 weeks. You do not complain. You do not ask for things. You just see what needs doing and you do it." That is what this club was built on. He had already turned to leave before she had finished reading. He did not wait for a response. He did not need one. She understood that the note was not an apology for his earlier suspicion, and not quite a welcome either. It was something more precise than both. It was a man revising his assessment out loud because he believed accuracy mattered more than consistency. She folded the note and put it in her pocket. That night, Cole called the full meeting. The men gathered in the main room, and Cole laid out everything without softening it. Gus, the payments, the Voss syndicate, the deadline. He did not shape the facts toward any particular conclusion. He gave them the shape of the problem and let them respond to it. The room was not quiet when he finished. She caught fragments from multiple directions. She caught the word Gus repeated many times with different tones. She caught the word war at least 4 times from at least 3 different mouths. She caught her own name twice, both times from Danny Voss, who looked at her both times with the expression she had been watching change over the past 2 weeks. Cole held up his hand, and the room came down. He laid out 3 directions. Pay. Refuse and fight. Find a way to remove the threat before the deadline forced the issue. He asked for voices. A man near the back stood up. She caught his name from someone else's mouth. Pete. He spoke for long enough that she caught the shape of the argument, something about risk. Something about depending on an outsider. And he looked at Riley twice while he was speaking. Cole said something she caught clearly. He said she found the ledger. She built the timeline. She identified the third option. You want to talk about what an outsider can or cannot do? You should have been paying attention this week. Danny Voss, from his spot at the bar, said something short. She caught two words. He said, "She is right." That was the last objection. 20 minutes later, Cole came back to the corner table where Riley had remained. He sat down. He wrote Danny is bringing him in. Gus Whitfield arrived within the hour. He was 45, a compact man with a neat gray beard and the look of someone who had once been physically capable and had settled into a quieter version of himself the way some men did at a certain age. He came through the door with the casual confidence of a man who had received 100 summons from this table and had no reason to expect this one was different. He saw Riley first. Something crossed his face. Not guilt, not yet. More like recognition. The recalibration of a man who has entered a situation and is rapidly updating his assessment of it. Then he saw what was on the table. He sat down. He looked at the documents. He looked at Cole. Cole did not show him the notepad. He spoke. Riley watched his lips. Cole said, "Tell me what you did and why you did it." Gus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I was keeping us alive." Cole said, "You were paying them $40,000, and you call that keeping us alive." Gus looked up. His face had a quality she recognized after a lifetime of reading faces. The quality of a man who had been carrying something alone for a very long time and had just been relieved of it, and did not yet know if that was rescue or ruin. He said, "They came to me 2 years ago, before Stone got sick. They wanted a meeting. I went alone because I did not want to bring it to Stone. He had enough. The territory disputes up north were already draining him. They told me they were moving into Billings and they were giving us a choice. Cooperate or be removed. I negotiated. The payments were the negotiation. It bought us time." Cole said time. Gus said Stone was dying. "I knew it before the diagnosis. Anyone who looked at him knew it. I thought if I could keep them quiet long enough for the transition to happen for you to take the chair, then we could deal with it properly. From a position of strength instead of mourning." Cole said, "And now?" Gus said, "The payments stopped when Stone passed. I stopped them because I did not have the authorization to continue, and I was not going to make that call without the president in the chair. They gave me a deadline, 2 weeks from Stone's funeral. They want 40,000 back the full amount, or they want a formal territorial agreement." Cole said, "And the deadline is," when Gus looked at the table. He said 6 days from today. Cole looked at Gus for a long time. Then he said something Riley could not fully catch, because he had turned slightly. She got the shape of it, words that ended in brother and honor and my father. Then Cole said clearly and directly, "You made a decision that was not yours to make for 2 years. And you let him die without knowing." Gus did not look away. He said, "I know." Cole said, "Get out." Gus stood. He did not argue. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He looked at Cole once more, and in his face was something that was not quite an apology and not quite a defense, just the face of a man who had made a calculation and understood now that the calculation had cost him everything he had been trying to protect. At the door, he stopped with his back to the room and said something. Riley caught only part of it because he was not facing her. She caught the words, "Stone and I am sorry," and nothing else. Then he was gone. The door did not slam. That was somehow worse. Cole sat very still for a moment. Then he picked up his pen and set it down again without writing anything. The fire in the far corner of the room kept going the way fires do regardless. She gave him 10 minutes, then she wrote on the notepad, "There is a third option. Not paying, not fighting. Something else." He looked up. She wrote, "They are not just a criminal organization. They are trying to become a legitimate business. I found a development company called Voss Holdings connected to the Meridian registration. They are applying for a series of commercial zoning permits in Billings. If they get those permits, they have a legal financial base and standing that makes them much harder to touch. If the right information reaches the right people before their permit hearing, their entire legal expansion collapses. And an organization that has spent 2 years building toward legal legitimacy will not risk federal attention over a $40,000 deadline from a motorcycle club." Cole read this slowly. He wrote, "When is the permit hearing?" She wrote, 11 days from today. He looked at the timeline. 6 days for the deadline, 11 days for the hearing, 5 days of overlap. He wrote, "How do we get the information to the right people?" She wrote, "I know someone who might help. Dorothy Halsey. She owned the bakery where I worked. Her building on Central Avenue was acquired by Meridian Property Group 8 months ago after they raised her rent to a number she could not sustain. She does not know that name yet, but she has been running a business in this city for 22 years. She knows people." Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he wrote, "You have been here for 2 weeks." She wrote, "I know." He wrote, "Why would you do this?" She thought about it carefully before she wrote, "Because the numbers were wrong, and wrong numbers bother me. And because nobody stopped on Route 3 for a long time before you did." She paused, then added, "I have spent my whole life being driven past. I know what it looks like when something real is about to be taken from people who built it honestly. I do not want to watch that happen." He read that. He read it again. She wrote, "I need to see something else first. Before we move, is there an office? Somewhere your father kept personal records." Cole looked at her. He wrote his office. Small room off the hallway. "I have not been in it since the funeral." She wrote, "I think you need to go in there tonight." He looked at the words. She held his gaze. She was not pushing him. She was giving him information that suggested a direction. The way she had been doing all along, and the direction this time was not external. It was the one thing he had been avoiding since he came back to this building, carrying his father's ashes and sat in his father's chair and stopped drinking his father's coffee. He went alone. She stayed at the corner table and waited. He was gone for almost an hour. When he came back, he was not the same in any visible way that she could catalog precisely. His face held the same controlled composition it usually held. He moved with the same deliberate economy. But something had shifted in the way he occupied the room. Something in the set of his shoulders that she recognized as the particular quality of a man who has put down something heavy and has not yet decided what to do with the hands that were carrying it. He sat down. He put a small leather-bound notebook on the table. He opened it to a page near the end, smoothed it flat, and turned it to face her. The handwriting was different from Cole's rounder, and more slanted the writing of a man who had learned to write in a different era. She read the entry. It said, "Gus came to me today. Told me everything. I told him I already knew. I have known for 4 months. I told him to keep writing. I did not want him to carry this alone. And I did not want to die watching him lose everything because of a choice he made trying to protect this family. Some decisions a man makes for love, even when they are wrong." Cole will handle it when the time comes. Cole always handles things. I just wish I could have told him myself. The entry was dated 8 months ago, 6 weeks before Stone died. She read it twice. Then she looked at Cole. He was looking at the wall, not the far wall with the raven. The closer one, the plain one, the one that held nothing. She did not write anything. She did not reach for the notepad. She got up from her chair, walked around the table, and sat down on the floor beside his chair with her back against the wall, the way she had sat on the floor of the storage room when she found the letter. Not because the floor was comfortable, but because sometimes the right posture for a hard moment was the most honest one. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. She spread her hands in the simple gesture she had learned meant, I am here. Nothing more required. He looked at his father's handwriting for a long time. Then he lowered his head, and she felt the slight vibration through the floorboards and the chair legs of a man letting go of something he had been holding at great cost. And she stayed exactly where she was and let the room hold them both in the quiet. That was not empty, but full of everything that did not need to be said. They sat like that for a long time. In the morning, Riley rode to Dorothy Halsey's house, which was a small craftsman on the east side of Billings that Dorothy owned outright and maintained with the same stubborn competence she applied to everything. Dorothy answered the door in an apron, covered in flour, assessed Riley's expression in 2 seconds, and said, "Come in," before Riley had a chance to write anything. They sat at Dorothy's kitchen table, which was the kind of table that had been the center of 10,000 conversations and showed it worn smooth in the places people rested their elbows and scarred in the corners from years of use. Dorothy made coffee. Then she sat down and looked at Riley and waited. Riley laid out what she had: the name Meridian Property Group, its connection to Voss Holdings, the zoning permits, the timeline. She wrote it across 3 pages of her notepad and turned them one at a time. Dorothy read each page. Her expression did not perform surprise. It performed recognition. The look of a woman who has suspected something for months and has just been handed confirmation, which is a different kind of feeling than being told something new. Dorothy said I knew the name on the lease agreement when it changed. Meridian. I looked them up and found nothing useful. A lawyer told me these holding companies were common, that it did not mean anything. Riley wrote, "It means something." Dorothy looked at the pages again. Then she looked at Riley and said, "What do you need from me?" Riley wrote, "You have been in Billings for 22 years. You know people. I need to know if there's anyone with standing who has been watching Voss Holdings and who might be able to use this information before their permit hearing 11 days from now." Dorothy was quiet. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She had the look of someone accessing a very large and carefully organized mental file. Then she said, "There is a federal agent. She came to see me 6 months ago, asked questions about my lease, my building, the company that acquired it. She gave me a card. She was thorough and direct, and she told me she was looking at a pattern of commercial acquisitions across eastern Montana that followed the same structure. She said she would follow up." Riley wrote, "Do you still have the card?" Dorothy stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer and returned with a business card that had a small coffee stain in one corner. She handed it to Riley. "Special Agent Dana Reeves, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Field Office, Billings, Montana." Riley photographed it with her phone. Then she wrote, "Can I use your name when I contact her?" Dorothy said, "You can do more than that. I will come with you." They were quiet for a moment. Dorothy refilled her coffee and then sat looking at her cup. Then she said, I had a daughter. She moved to Seattle 12 years ago. We talk on the phone, but she does not come back. Riley read this and wrote, I had a mother. She moved to Phoenix. We do not talk at all. Dorothy looked at that. She did not say she was sorry in the way people said it when they wanted to move past something. She just sat with it. Then she wrote on Riley's notepad because writing felt more careful than speaking. You know, what is strange? I have been feeding people for 30 years. Every single person who ever sat in my bakery and needed something, I gave them food. I just never stopped long enough to notice I was doing the same thing they were, looking for somewhere to belong. Riley read that. Then she looked at Dorothy, and Dorothy looked at her, and something settled between them. Not a resolution exactly, more like a recognition. Two women who had been running so hard at their separate problems for so long that they had not noticed they were moving in the same direction. Riley wrote, Then let us go do something about it. That afternoon, they drove to the FBI field office in Dorothy's truck. The field office was on the fourth floor of a building on Montana Avenue that looked like it had been designed to be forgettable on purpose. Dana Reeves was 45 years old, with red hair, going gray at the temples, and the kind of posture that came from spending a career being taken seriously in rooms where that required effort. She came to the reception area herself, looked at Riley and Dorothy, and said nothing about the notepad or the laminated card. When Riley held it up, she took them to a conference room. Riley laid out the documentation. Everything. The ledger, the timeline, the Meridian registration, the Voss Holdings permit application, the letter with Gus Whitfield's initials. She wrote the context at the top of the first page. This information comes from internal records of a private organization that has been a target of the Voss Syndicate's expansion strategy. The organization is cooperating voluntarily. Dana Reeves read everything without speaking. She went through each document twice, made notes in a small leather notebook, and then looked up at Riley. She said, How did you access these records? Riley wrote, I was hired to organize a storage room. The ledger was in a mislabeled folder. The letter was in an unlabeled box. I did not remove anything from the premises. I documented what I found and brought copies. Dana said, the organization you are describing, the Iron Ravens. Riley wrote, yes. Dana said they are aware you are here. Riley wrote, the president sent me. Dana looked at that for a moment. Then she looked at Dorothy. Dorothy said I owned a building on Central Avenue for 18 years. Meridian Property Group acquired the note on my lease 14 months ago and raised my rent to a number I could not sustain. I closed 6 months ago. I lost 2 employees and a business I built from scratch. I want to know if what happened to me was part of what she is describing. Dana said it was. Dorothy absorbed that. She said, all right then. Dana turned back to Riley. She said the permit hearing is in 11 days. I need time to verify this and move it through the appropriate channels. That is a very short window. Riley wrote, there is also a deadline in 6 days. The organization is being pressured for $40,000 or a territorial agreement. If the syndicate believes their legal strategy is intact, they will enforce that deadline. Dana said, we can make them aware through appropriate channels that their permit application is under review for procedural irregularities. Standard language. It gives nothing away, but it creates uncertainty. Riley wrote, how quickly? Dana said, within 48 hours. Riley looked at the timeline. 48 hours of uncertainty. 6 days to the deadline. 11 days to the hearing. Close enough. Not comfortable, but close enough. She wrote, "What do you need from us?" Dana said cooperation. Formal statements. Possibly testimony. Riley wrote, "The organization will cooperate." Dana looked at her. She said, "You seem very certain of that." Riley wrote, "I am." She drove back to the Raven's Nest in the late afternoon. The light was low and flat, the October sun already dropping toward the mountains, and the gravel lot was full. In the way it was full when something had gathered the members, when the word had gone out and the bikes had come from wherever they spent their days, and lined up in the lot with the quiet authority of vehicles waiting for a purpose. She walked inside and went directly to Cole's table and put her notepad down and wrote, "We have federal cooperation. Formal process starts within 48 hours. The permit hearing is still the key. We have time if nothing moves before the deadline." He read it. He looked at her face. Then he wrote, "How did you do that in one afternoon?" She wrote Dorothy Halsey. He looked at that. Then he wrote, "Are you all right?" She stopped. She looked at the words. He was not asking about logistics. He had never asked her that before. She wrote, "You have been carrying this for weeks. You went through your father's office last night. You are doing all of this while grieving and still running 40 people." He wrote, "That is not what I asked." She looked at him. Then she wrote, "I am all right. I think I am actually all right." He wrote, "Good. Stay for dinner. Brick is cooking." She looked toward the kitchen where Brick was visible, moving with the focused certainty of a man who cooked the way he did everything, by deciding the job was worth doing well and then doing it. She wrote, "What is he making?" He wrote, "No idea, but it will be the largest quantity of whatever it is you have ever seen." She sat down. Outside, the October dark came down over Billings, and somewhere across town, a shell company called Meridian Property Group was still operating with the assumption that no one had found the ledger in the unlabeled folder. And somewhere in a federal building on Montana Avenue, Dana Reeves was opening a case file that had been waiting for 18 months for the right piece to arrive from an unexpected direction. The 48 hours Dana Reeves had promised moved the way all crucial time moves, both too fast and too slow at once. On the morning of the second day, Cole wrote a note and slid it across the table. Dana moved faster than expected. The procedural review notice went to Voss Holdings this morning through their registered legal counsel. Official language, nothing that identifies the source. She wrote, "How did they respond?" He wrote, "Unknown yet." She said we should expect movement within 24 hours. Either they back down or they push forward to demonstrate they are not intimidated. She thinks they will push forward. Riley wrote, "Because backing down looks like guilt." He wrote, "Yes." By 9:30 that morning, Brick had not arrived. She noticed it because Brick was a man of profound routine, and his routine included arriving at the Raven's Nest by 8, making the first pot of coffee, and beginning whatever physical maintenance the building required that day. By 9:30, the coffee had been made by someone else, and the morning had a slightly different texture to it. The texture of a space where the person who usually holds things steady is absent. Cole noticed at 10, 2 members were sent to check Brick's apartment and came back with faces that told her the answer before Cole wrote it down. He wrote, "Brick is not there. His bike is gone. His phone goes to voicemail. She wrote, "Where does he usually go for breakfast?" He wrote, "A diner on the south side. We sent someone. He was there. He left around 7:45, heading west on Rimrock Road." Riley wrote, "Rimrock Road goes toward the industrial district." Cole looked at the words. She could see him not wanting to follow where they led. She wrote, "If they got to him after the notice reached their lawyers this morning, this was fast and it was a message." Cole stood up. She had seen him stand up with purpose before. This was different. This was a man moving toward something that frightened him and moving toward it anyway because there was no other direction available. She stood up too. He looked at her. He wrote fast, "Stay here." She wrote back equally fast, "No." He did not have time to argue. They found Brick at an industrial warehouse on the west side of the Billings Freight District. Cole parked the van 100 yards back and went in with Danny and two others on foot. Riley sat in the van for 4 minutes. Then she got out and went around the south side of the building, where a row of ground-level windows ran along the foundation. She crouched below the window line and moved along the wall until she found an angle that gave her a sight line into the interior. Brick was there, seated against a support column near the east wall, hands behind him. 4 men standing in a loose arrangement near the center of the space. Brick was not visibly injured. He was sitting the way a very large man sits when he has decided that being calm is the most useful thing he can do, upright and still and patient. One of the 4 men was talking. She positioned herself to read his lips through the glass and adjusted her angle until she had a clear line. He was giving a message. She caught the structure of it. "This is a demonstration. Tell your president that the notice from the federal office changes nothing. The deadline stands 40,000. Or agreement, this is a courtesy. Next time, it is not a courtesy." She moved back along the wall and met Cole coming around the corner. She grabbed his arm and turned him to face her and wrote fast on her notepad. "Brick is inside. East wall. He appears unharmed. 4 men. They are delivering a verbal message about the deadline. They plan to release him. Wait at the front. They will exit through the side." Cole read it. Then he looked at Danny. Danny moved. The others moved with him. Brick walked out of the side entrance 7 minutes later, escorted by nothing except his own dignity. Cole reached him first. The short exchange of 2 men confirming essential facts. Brick nodding. Then both of them turning toward the van. Brick saw Riley standing by the vehicle. He walked to her. He wrote on her notepad, his handwriting less precise than usual. "You came," she wrote. "Of course I came." He wrote, "They said they knew about the FBI contact. They said it does not matter." She wrote, "They are wrong." He looked at her. She looked back at him with the steadiness she felt. Not performance, not reassurance. Actual certainty rooted in 2 weeks of numbers and patterns, and the complete picture she had built in her mind. Brick wrote, "How do you know?" She wrote, "Because their permit hearing is 9 days away, and they have spent 2 years building toward it. The 40,000 and the deadline are a distraction. The permit hearing is everything. And they have just handed us confirmation that the notice rattled them. Rattled people make mistakes." He read that. Then he wrote, "Then we make sure they do not recover." Cole drove them back. That night he called Dana Reeves and told her about Brick. Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that Cole wrote down for Riley. "This accelerates our timeline. We are moving toward formal action on the permit application. I need one more thing from your organization. Cole wrote, What does she need? Riley wrote testimony. Someone who can speak to the internal records from a position of direct knowledge. Cole looked at her. She did not look away. She wrote, I will do it. He wrote Riley. She wrote, I found the ledger. I built the timeline. I documented everything. I am the direct knowledge. He wrote, If this goes to formal proceedings, you will be a named witness. She wrote, I know. He wrote, These are not people who respond well to named witnesses. She wrote, I know that too. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he wrote, Why would you do this? She wrote, Because the numbers were wrong, and wrong numbers bother me, and because I've been invisible my whole life. The thing about being invisible is you learn to see clearly. I saw what your father built. I do not want to watch it get taken apart by people with lawyers and shell companies and the patience to wait everyone out. He read that. He read it again. Then he wrote, My father would have liked you. She wrote, Tell me about him. So he did. Not that night. Over the next 3 days, in the moments between the work of the case and the logistics of the coming hearing, he wrote things about Stone Mercer in the margins of notepads and on the backs of receipts, and once on a paper bag from the diner where Brick had eaten breakfast on the morning of the worst day. He wrote about a man who had built something from a group of people the world had designated as problems and had said to each of them, You are not a problem to me, you are a person. And here is a place where that is the first and last word on the subject. She understood then why 40 men rode in formation for his ashes. She understood why Cole sat every morning in his father's chair. She understood the raven carved above the fireplace and the name of the building, and the particular way the men moved through it, not like men moving through a place they used, but like men moving through a place they had been given and intended to be worthy of. On the 7th day, 3 days before the permit hearing, Dana Reeves called with the update Riley had been waiting for. Cole wrote it out for her in full. The FBI had completed preliminary verification of the documentation Riley had provided. The Meridian Property Group and Voss Holdings connections were confirmed through financial tracing the Bureau had been building independently for 22 months. Riley's ledger and timeline had provided the final link between the internal club records and the syndicate's external financial structure. The link Dana had not been able to establish through public records alone. The permit application was being formally flagged for review under federal financial disclosure requirements. The hearing would proceed, but the application was now under active investigation and would not be approved pending the outcome. Dana had said one more thing. The investigation into the commercial acquisitions, including the properties acquired through Meridian from business owners, including Dorothy Halsey, was being expanded. There would be restitution proceedings. It would take time. But it was moving. Riley read all of it. Then she put the notepad down and looked at the far wall. She had a feeling she did not have a precise word for. Not relief, though relief was part of it. Not satisfaction, though that was present too. Something more like the feeling of a long calculation, finally resolving the moment when the numbers come right, and you know with certainty that the picture you have been building is the true one. She picked up the pen. She wrote, It worked. He wrote, You worked. She shook her head slightly. She wrote, We did. Then the cooperating witness changed everything. 3 days after the hearing, Dana Reeves called Cole. with a development none of them had anticipated. The investigation into Voss Holdings had moved faster than projected because of a cooperating witness within the organization. Someone who had been looking for a way out for 2 years and had decided the federal flag on the permit application was the signal they had been waiting for. In the information provided by this witness was a detail about Riley. Cole wrote it down for her, carefully giving her every word. The syndicate had identified Riley Cross 8 months ago, not from her work at the Raven's Nest, from a delivery route on the south side of Billings, where a member of the syndicate had conducted a meeting in a parked car outside a restaurant, and where a young woman on a delivery bike had stopped at the adjacent building for a pickup and had spent 4 minutes within clear sightline of the car. The member reviewing security footage later had noted that the young woman appeared to have been looking at the car and had understood or suspected what it meant. He had reported it, the decision to push her out of the delivery job, through a regional operations manager named Harlan Reed, who was on the syndicate's informal payroll, had been made the following week. The malfunction of her bike camera on Route 3 had been arranged. They had wanted her away from the South Side routes and out of a job that gave her reasons to be in certain areas of the city. They had not determined what she had seen or what she could read. They had been cautious. They had been trying to make her invisible. She sat with this for a long time after Cole set down the pen. She looked at the words on the notepad, and she looked at the wall, and she thought about 8 months of her life, the job applications that went nowhere, the careful money management, the 11 days until rent, the calculation that never came right. She thought about sitting on Route 3 in the rain with a flat tire and $40 of pastries. She picked up the pen. She wrote, "They saw me reading lips and thought the solution was to take away my job and my stability and make sure I had no reason to be anywhere near them." Cole read it. He wrote, "Yes." She wrote, "They made me invisible so I could not see them." He wrote, "Yes." She looked at that. Then she wrote, "And the thing that broke their entire 2-year strategy was the thing they were afraid of." I read them anyway. Through a warehouse window. She paused before writing the last line. She wrote, "I have spent my whole life being treated like silence is the same as absence. It is not. It never was." Cole held her gaze. He did not write anything for a moment. Then he wrote, "That is who you are, Riley. That has always been who you are." The permit hearing took place on a Thursday morning in a City Hall conference room. Riley sat at the back of the public gallery with Dorothy on one side and Cole on the other. The hearing moved through formal language and citation numbers and made its significance invisible to anyone who did not know what the citations meant. She knew what they meant. When the hearing officer read the notation that the application had been flagged under federal financial disclosure review and could not be approved pending investigation, the two men in suits at the applicant's table exchanged a look that told her everything. One immediately typed something on his phone. The other looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man who has just watched a very long project come to an end. The application was tabled indefinitely. On the way out, Dorothy stopped on the steps and looked at the October sky, which was clear and cold, and the particular blue that only Montana in autumn managed. Dorothy said, "Do you know what I'm going to do with the insurance money from the lease settlement?" Riley wrote, what Dorothy said. "Open the bakery again. Different building, better location." She paused. I am going to need a reliable delivery person. Riley looked at her. Dorothy was looking back with the directness of a woman who had been making offers for 40 years and knew how to make them land. Riley wrote, I might know someone. Dorothy laughed. It was a good laugh. The laugh of a woman who had been through something difficult and had come out the other side with her sense of humor not only intact, but sharpened. That evening, back at the Raven's Nest, the club gathered without a formal summons. Men came in through the evening bikes pulling into the lot in ones and twos, Brick starting a fire in the fireplace under the carved raven, Danny organizing the bar with efficiency that suggested he had been thinking about this particular evening for several days. Dorothy Halsey arrived at 7 with a Dutch oven she carried in both hands and set on the bar counter with the authority of a woman depositing something important. She had made pot roast. She explained this to no one because it required no explanation. Riley stood near the fireplace and watched the room fill. She watched the men she had come to know over the past 3 weeks, their faces in the firelight. Brick's steady largeness, Danny's watchful precision, Cody's youth and the slight performative toughness she had understood from the second day as the armor of someone not yet certain he belonged. She watched them eat Dorothy's food and talk in the way people talk when something threatening has receded and the relief is still new enough to taste. When the meal was winding down, Brick came and sat across from her. He had something in his hand, a folded piece of paper. He set it on the table in front of her. She unfolded it. He had been practicing. The letters were large and careful and slightly uneven. The writing of a man learning a new alphabet from scratch. He had written her name in ASL, fingerspelling each letter represented by its hand shape, described in his own shorthand. And then beneath it, his own name, BRICK, in the same careful script. She looked at it for a long moment. Then she picked up his pen and wrote her name back to him, the same way RILEY. Each letter shaped and described. Not perfectly, but clearly. He looked at what she had written. His face did the thing it did when something mattered to him, went very still, and then opened in a way that his ordinary expression did not. The way a window opens onto something you did not know was there. She folded the paper and gave it back to him, and he put it in his vest pocket. Cole came to stand beside her, both of them facing the room. After a moment, he turned, and she turned, and he wrote, "How are you?" She wrote, "I am okay. I think I am actually okay." He wrote, "What does that mean, actually okay?" She thought about it. She wrote, "It means the math works." Not just the money math, though, that too. The other math. The one where you count up the things that are real against the things that are uncertain and see which side is heavier. He wrote, "Which side is heavier tonight?" She wrote, "The real side." By a lot. He looked at her for a moment. Then he wrote, "I want to show you something tomorrow morning, early, before anyone else is here." She wrote, "What is it?" He wrote, "Something my father built. I have not shown anyone since he died." She held that for a moment. The weight of it, what it meant that he was offering it. She wrote, "Okay." He wrote, 6 o'clock. "Bring something warm." She wrote, "Is it outside?" He wrote, "Yes." She wrote, "Then I will bring everything warm I own." The faint suggestion of a smile moved across his face, the one she had been cataloging, the one that reached his eyes only when it was real. Then he turned back to the room, and she turned back with him, and they stood together in the warmth and the firelight, while everything around them moved and talked and existed in the particular way of people who have come through something hard and are allowing themselves to rest in the fact of having come through it. At 6 in the morning, the sky over Billings was the gray purple of early light before the sun had cleared the eastern ridgeline. Riley stood in the gravel lot in her heaviest jacket and waited. Cole came out at 6:02 with a thermos in one hand and two helmets in the other. He handed her one without writing anything because the communication was clear. She put it on. He rode north out of the city on roads that narrowed as the development thinned and the land opened up into the high plain, with the mountains in the distance still holding the season's first snow on their upper reaches. She sat behind him on the Road King and felt the engine through every contact point, that deep mechanical pulse in the register that was actually available to her, and let the morning come in through her eyes. After 20 minutes, he turned onto a dirt track that ran through dry grass toward a rise in the terrain. At the top of the rise, the track ended at a flat overlook with a view of the valley below. The city, small in the distance, the river catching what little light had made it over the horizon, yet the mountains wide and silent. There was a bench on the overlook. Handmade, heavy timber iron fittings built to last in weather. She could see from the quality of its construction and the particular care of its placement, set at exactly the angle that took in the full view, that it had been made by someone who planned to come here often and intended to do it right. She sat down. Cole sat beside her and poured coffee from the thermos and handed her a cup, and they looked at the valley together. After a while, he took out his notepad. He wrote, "He built the bench the summer I turned 12. We used to come up here before school on my birthday every year. He would make coffee on a camp stove, and we would sit here until it was light enough to ride back down." She read that. Then she wrote, "When is your birthday?" He wrote, 4 days ago. She looked at him. He was looking at the valley with the expression she had learned to read as the one he wore when he was being honest at a level that cost him something. She wrote, "You came here alone 4 days ago." He wrote, "Yes. First time without him." She wrote, "What was it like?" He wrote, "Quiet." He paused, then wrote, "Different kind of quiet than I expected. Not bad, just different." She looked at the valley and thought about quiet, about how it had textures and weights, and that some quiet was absence and some was presence, and that the difference mattered enormously and was sometimes very hard to identify in the moment. She wrote, "He would have come here this morning. If he were here, and this week had happened, and it was over, he would have come here." Cole looked at the words. She watched something move through his face. Not grief exactly, or not only grief. Something that had grief in it, but also something more. Something closer to the feeling she had been trying to name for herself. The weight of the real side of the scale finally pulling. He wrote, "Yes." He would have. She wrote, "Then he is here." Cole did not write anything for a moment. The light was coming now, clearing the ridgeline and moving down the mountains in that slow daily reckoning, and the valley below was coming into its full detail. The river and the road and the city and the plain extending to the horizon where the sky was turning gold. She felt the bench vibrate slightly as Cole shifted his weight. She felt the cold through her jacket and the warmth of the coffee cup in her hands, and the subtle transmitted shudder of the Road King cooling after the ride. He wrote, "My father used to say the people worth keeping are the ones who show up to the hard parts without being asked. She read that. She wrote, he said that Cole wrote the night before he died. I did not understand it then. She looked at the valley. She wrote, do you understand it now? He wrote, I think I am starting to. She thought about Route 3 in the rain and the flat tire and $40 of pastries and the particular silence of a morning when no one stopped. She thought about vibration felt through boot soles. She thought about a notepad and a word written in square, clear letters. I know, she wrote, I have been showing up to hard parts my whole life. I just never had anywhere to show up to before. He read that. He turned to look at her directly in the way he had from the beginning, without performance, without overcorrection, just direct and honest and present. He wrote, you have somewhere now. She looked at the words. Then she looked at him. Then she looked at the valley where the morning was fully arriving, the light off the river and the mountains holding their snow, and the city just beginning its day. Below, full of people who would wake up and make coffee and go to work and not know that something had been decided up here on a handmade bench at the top of a rise above everything. She wrote, yes, I do. The sun cleared the ridge, the valley filled with light. Beside her, Cole Mercer poured more coffee, and they sat together in the warmth of the morning. Two people who had stopped in the hard parts for each other without being asked and did not need to say anything more about what that meant. Back in the city, at a space on a new block with better windows, Dorothy Halsey was already up with flour on her hands and the ovens going. The lease was signed. The space was hers. In 2 weeks, she would open the doors, and the first order in the delivery log would be from a motorcycle club on the north side. A standing weekly order placed by a man named Marcus Holt, who had signed the form in large, careful print and left a tip that was embarrassingly generous. At the Raven's Nest, Danny Voss had submitted a formal proposal to the club membership for a standing designation. The language was simple. It described a category that had not existed before, and that the club had voted 31 in favor and 0 opposed, with 4 abstentions from men who felt the designation was insufficient and wanted something more formal to create. The card, made from hand-tooled leather, read, Riley Cross. Allie of the Iron Ravens. Danny had written the language himself. He had worked on it for 2 days. He was not a man who expressed things easily, and so when he expressed them, he made sure they were right. In the filing room of the FBI field office on Montana Avenue, Dana Reeves had 3 new case files open on her desk by 7 in the morning. The cooperating witness inside the Voss syndicate had provided information expanding the investigation into 3 additional states. It was going to be a long year. She had expected that. She had also expected, based on 20 years of experience, that cases like this one took 18 months of patient work to fall apart in a single morning when one right piece arrived from an unexpected direction. She had not expected the piece to be a 22-year-old deaf woman who had been systematically pushed out of her job and her stability by an organization that had correctly identified her perception as a threat and had underestimated what she would do with that perception when she found somewhere to stand. Dana Reeves closed one file, opened another, and got to work. And on the overlook north of the city, when the coffee was finished and the morning had completed its arrival, Riley Cross and Cole Mercer walked back to the Road King and put on their helmets and rode down the dirt track and onto the road that led back toward the valley. She held on and felt the engine and felt the cold and watched the landscape open up ahead of them, the wide Montana plain running out to the mountains in every direction. The sky overhead, the clear, deep blue that came after the hardest weather had passed. She pressed her palms flat against the tank and felt the engine running. That was enough. That had always been enough. The road opened up ahead. The mountains held their light. The bike carried them forward into the morning, and they rode toward everything that was still coming. And, for the first time in a very long time, Riley Cross did not feel like she was riding toward it alone.